Hello, and welcome to yet another online content enhancement for my music humanities class. Hi, I'm Brad. This is going to be the last video that we're doing about the medieval era. We're going to move on from here. And what I want to do in this particular video is talk about two different late medieval composers. And this is kind of be the way that we're going to be doing the rest of the class. We'll be talking about particular composers and the way that they kind of instantiated or became involved with the particular eras. But in this case, the medieval guys we're going to talk about, the first one is Philippe de Vitry. And he lived from 1291 to 1361. And he was a French composer, music theorist, and a poet. And let me bring up the map here real quick. Yeah, he operated primarily in kind of the northern part of France. And again, this is where a lot of the money was beginning to be concentrated in the power. We're seeing a shift a bit from Rome, especially with the Gregorian chant, up to this part of the world. He worked for the Bourbon kings, and he was also very popular as a composer. All of a sudden people are making their money as composers. And he was also well known as a music theorist. He did a lot of work in enhancing musical notation, and you'll hear that his pieces are very complicated as a result. And in fact, he wrote a treatise that became pretty well known. I misspelled his name in a big way here. Okay, he wrote that the music that he and his contemporaries were doing that he liked was called the Ars Nova. And that contrasted with the Ars Antiqua, which was the old Leonin and Peritan stuff, because obviously they're doing like the new thing. And that was obviously much better. And this is, again, going to be something that's going to play out through the rest of our history here. The idea that something new and something innovative and bold is going to be like, the cat's meow. He wrote some pretty interesting stuff. I'm going to play something real quick here. This is an example of what de Vitry's pieces sounded like, and I'll talk about it in just a second. Okay, this is called Cum Statua. So it kind of keeps on going. It's a feature of medieval music. We're going to be talking about that in the future. It also has that bizarre kind of medieval harmonies that we were talking about last time. But what's interesting is that this is like I said, he made a living as a composer, and he composed basically just kind of songs. In fact, this is an example of one of those things. It's called a chanson, which is kind of just like a song. And a lot of the work that he did was taken from a thing called the Roman de Fauvel. And this is kind of interesting because it's about a fauve-colored horse. It's a very popular kind of literary work from that era. And the interesting thing about this horse is that it rose quite high in ecclesiastical and political circles. It was a virulent attack on the church and the state. And he was kind of able to get away with it, especially in setting these things to music. Kind of intriguing stuff. So, he became very popular for some of these things, and people really kind of got a kick out of him. And in fact, people would hire him to do things. Here's another piece of his, Phoebus Mundo Orion. I'm going to play a little bit of this, and I'll talk about it in a second. Okay, so you're hearing kind of very dense, kind of strange polyphony, and again that weird harmony that we associate with medieval music. The polyphony was even denser than you thought because the different vocal parts are actually in different languages. And this is a piece, again, you just got to admire these composers. They know, again, what side of the bread their butter was on. This is a piece that was commissioned by the noble in charge of Bern, Switzerland. I forgot the exact name. And it had three parts. The first part that was kind of low was sort of a religious part, just kind of like, taking some religious melodies and putting it in, that old Cantus Firmus thing. The second part was a description of the chancellor, whatever it was, of Bern, as being just a fabulous guy, akin to the Sun King of all, and akin to the sun, And the third part was about all the great things that this particular Baron person had done for the populace. So this is a commissioned piece, and Philippe knew how to write a good tune for these people. I should also mention that you heard in the first piece I played of his some instruments. At this point, instruments are beginning to be included in the notation, so we know kind of what this sounded like. In fact, I want to play a third piece of his. One thing that occurred to me, I forgot to put up the timeline. He operated, again, towards the end of the medieval period. Next time we're going to show you, how these periods are kind of divided up in our weird way. Yeah, he was kind of like active right about, 1325, 13 whatever. Okay. So he also wrote, and a lot of composers back then at this time wrote things called motets. And these could be either sacred or secular. I'm going to put a link on our webpage, in fact, it's there already, to the discussion of a motet. It's based usually on religious melodies, but like I said, it can be also secular. And it's kind of like, it's hard to tell a motet apart from a chanson. Motets were sometimes used in a mass, as a meditation on a religious theme. But again, they were also secular pieces that were done, as festivals or, particular noble events and things like that. And I want to play you a motet called Firmissimi Fidum. And this is a piece that Vitry wrote. And I want to play you something here because it's kind of interesting. I have something to show you. Let me start it out here. Again, purely vocal, different languages, dense polyphony, and they didn't really know how to stop their music. It just kind of kept on going. This was densely polyphonic music, but it was the very beginnings of exploring polyphony, and they didn't have some of the structures in place that we're going to encounter in the Renaissance about how to shape a polyphonic line. But what's interesting is I have a second version of this, and this shows you that we actually probably have a pretty good idea of what this sounded like, because these are two different interpretations of the neumic music that de Vitry had written for this piece. And here's what this one sounds like. Obviously very similar. There's some differences, and a lot of it has to do with maybe some pacing and tempo and things like that. But by and large, we're getting a pretty good sense through notation of what this music sounded like. Okay? So now we're going to go on from there to talk about our second composer, a guy named Guillaume. Let me spell this out here, make sure I do it right. De Machaut. Oh, I can't type very well. Okay, and he was kind of coextensive with de Vitry. He lived from 1300 to 1377. And just let me bring up the timeline here and show you what he kind of looked like. Okay. Okay, so very similar. They obviously knew of each other. They were both very famous. At this point, again, thanks to Lianan and Peritin, there's no more, well, there's still anonymous pieces, but these guys are putting their names on their work because it was important for them because that's how they made their living. And Machaut also operated in kind of the same area that de Vitry did. Let me bring up the area to show you where he was. Okay, de Vitry was sort of over here, and Machaut concentrated over on the more eastern side of, kind of Paris, Northern Europe, especially around Luxembourg and places like that, He also had a stronger connection to the church than de Vitry did. He wrote a fair number of masses. We'll play one at the end here. But he also wrote chansons and things like that. Let me give you an example of one of his sort of chansons. Okay, this is a piece called Quies Promesse. Here we go. So again, densely polyphonic. You'll hear different languages going on. Similar in very many ways to de Vitry's music. This is the music of that time. I'm not going to ask you to tell the difference between the two. I'll be honest, I probably couldn't myself. But yeah, pretty intense stuff. And again, those qualities, kind of continuing to go, the weird harmonies and things like that. Now, Machaut did something that I thought was really intriguing. Again, he was commissioned. He wrote for nobility. He also wrote for the church. But occasionally, he seemed to write just for himself. And this piece, Lasse comment obiere, I'm going to play it, and then I'm going to tell you what it's about. Yeah, this piece, I'm not sure if it was commissioned or not. It's basically just a piece meditating on how difficult life is and how tough it is to be like alive and trying to make a living. This is very contemporary stuff. If we could, understand the words and get around the weird harmonies, I think that he just wrote this piece because he felt it. And that's kind of a new thing that's beginning to happen here. We're going to start encountering more of that. Again, this idea, though, that you are somebody who expresses your innermost feelings didn't really become currency until the Romantic era. And we're several centuries away from that. Okay, I'm going to play as an ending here. He did write masses. This is a Kyrie from a mass that he wrote for Notre Dame Cathedral. And yeah, we'll see what happens here. Okay. Again, very dense polyphony. We're hearing that now in all of this music. This is becoming a real kind of part of what it is to be a composer, to be able to compose these polyphonic pieces with a sense of how the harmony goes. Now, one of the things that's missing is you're not hearing that cantus firmus. It's embedded in there, but it's not nearly as apparent as it was, with, say, Leonin and Peritan and some of the earlier composers. And again, the church wasn't real happy about that, but of course, these clever composers like Machaut, they knew to do something like this. So they threw the chant in. All of a sudden it's like the priest can go, all right, this is okay. We'll pay you your money. Yeah, you've done an okay job. Yeah, this play with the church is going to be, like I said, kind of a continuing saga. And we'll explore that in the future.